welcome back to Non-Toxic Environments. This is your host, Andy Pace. It's so good to be with you again this week. This week is I'm working on what we talked about a few weeks ago and just talking about what's been written about our industry, about our issues with environmental and health concerns over the years. And we had such a great response to the last author we brought on. We thought it'd be great to bring somebody else in who actually has, I think, just a real breadth of knowledge from what she's discussed and written about. And of course, a lot of these articles may be, recent or even a few years old. So I'm not certainly going to be asking detailed questions about the information, but I want to really get a feeling as to how these are being received in the publications and what other publications are asking for topics, because it really would kind of help us in not only in future episodes of the show, but also in just learning a little bit what's going on outside of our own bubble. Okay. So I'd like to welcome to the show Sandi Schwartz. And Sandi, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
I am very happy to have you here. I want to get a little bit of background information from you because, I mean, you have 20 plus years of journalistic experience, specifically, I believe, within the sustainable environmental side of things. What got you interested in that in the first place?
Yeah, it's interesting how life twists and turns. And we have a guest here. Hi. So I want to take you back to graduating from undergraduate college at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And I thought I was going to go to law school and be an environmental lawyer. Who knows? That could still happen, right?
Right.
I'm in midlife, kind of considering the next move. You never know, as the kids, become an empty nest. So I actually was thinking about it. My first job was at the EPA.
Oh.
I worked for the Design for Environment program, which deals with a lot of non-toxic products and working with industry to revamp their products to be safer and healthier. And I was looking back at some of my articles. I recently wrote an article for Tech Target, which is for the tech industry. And they wanted an article about sustainability in the office. And I ended up mentioning the Design for Environment program. I also spent several years after that position in a consulting firm in the DC area working on Energy Star products. I did all the communications and marketing for them. So I kind of, I was really engaged in what was going on in the DC area. And then I got married and got pulled to Florida because my husband's job, and as we were, wanting to start a family, I turned to freelance writing, and something I could do from home while my kid was napping. And funny enough, I started back then. It was the time of mommy bloggers, because my son is now 15 and a half. And so I got involved with that. I was writing back then about BPA free, thinking about all the toxics
Right.
that I dealt with, but from a parenting perspective. And then eventually I came back to, my core, which was my passion and interest in environmental writing and journalism. So I wrote a book too, which I want to tie into this. It's all about the mental health benefits of nature. It's called Finding Eco Happiness. Oh, look at this. I happen to have it right here.
Oh, fabulous. Excellent.
And, it's all related. My conclusion at the end is really, if we need to save the planet for ourselves, for our mental health, for our health. And how can we do that? As one of the ways is to get people to appreciate the benefits of nature. So I've come at it from all angles, whether it's toxic exposure, sustainability, innovative products, and also even the mental health connection that we have to our planet.
Well, I love that connection. I love that angle on this. I can't tell you how often that topic has come up in these weekly calls, these weekly podcasts, because it's not brought up enough. And one of the things that I see, and I've been a consultant, an environmental consultant, working within people's homes for almost 30 years, over 30 years now. Um, and I always have to bring up, you have to remember you can only do so much. You can only go so far. And I use this phrase all the time. You're going to drive yourself to the poorhouse or the nut house, one of the two, trying to do everything you possibly can. So you have to pick and choose your battles. And now when it comes to the environmental side of things, this is a vastly different topic than the human health side of the equation. Now, I know there are correlations between, direct human health concerns with outdoor air pollution within the human body, of course. But looking at the two different topics, inside of a home or the human health aspect versus outdoor environmentalism and environmental concerns, I go back to the mid 90s when the United States Green Building Council was first formed. And it was formed specifically because of outdoor air pollution, energy efficiency, and global sustainability issues. They never really focused on the human health aspect of this. I don't think they ignored it on purpose. I think we all thought it was all tied together. And then over the last 30 years now, it's been this shift of, all right, this is eco-friendly, this is energy efficient, and this is human friendly. And now people are getting into this situation where their head starts to spin. It's like, I think I'm doing the right thing, but maybe I'm not. And they get this fear of just moving forward at all. It's this analysis paralysis. So I hope, I assume you kind of dig into that a little bit.
Well, and I would also say that a lot of it ends up being more interconnected than we realize for a number of reasons. So when you make decisions inside your home, for example, that do impact what's going on outside of the environment, such as in your kitchen, plastics.
Yeah.
How much plastic are we using? So, and now they're finding the human health connection to plastic, microplastics, in our bloodstream. So the decisions we do make indoors, inside, in our homes every day affects not only us, but the grander, bigger globe and everybody's health. And then there's also this movement of, and again, this kind of ties back to what I talk a lot about, is nature making us feel better. Yes. And I talk a lot about that in your home. And I actually just was reading a bunch of books all about like healthy homes and mindfulness in the homes. And a lot of them talk about the core elements of nature, the fractal patterns of nature, which are soothing to us, the textures, plants, of course, which actually detoxify our indoor air quality as well. The lighting, having water elements. I mean, all of these biophilic design techniques that we can now use in our homes. So it's kind of coming full circle. I think for a long time we did divide, like our inside home needs to be beautiful, and then that's nature. And when we go outdoors for a hike, that's separate. But it's really, what I find fascinating is like it all coming together. There's also this huge movement about like bringing the outdoors, the backyard, kind of like making it seamless to the indoors, and that's been something that I've been hearing a lot from experts in the home design arena as well.
Sure, I can say that back in the early 2000s, I wrote an article for one of the green publications. I think it was Natural Home Magazine, and I talked about this growing trend of people trying to bring the outdoors in. And I didn't know at the time the term biophilic design wasn't really, I don't want to say invented, but it certainly wasn't broadcast the way it is now. But that really is what it was. It's the idea of getting the feeling of nature, whether it's the feeling of nature through textures, through colors, through smell, lighting, so that it just feels more natural within the body. So this is right on the cusp of doing a project with a local designer where she designed a medical office building, and we supplied for the office building everything that was going to come in contact with human skin was going to be something natural.
Mm.
Cork floors, pounded bark wall coverings, natural clay plasters, natural stone, everything. Again, what you come in contact with was a natural material. And people said they just felt better walking into that building. They didn't have to get treated. They just felt better being there.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, even I have my eye doctor always has nice like ocean um, videos playing, in the office. It's so different than like a stark environment. I mean, I think people that are realizing even in the medical community that they can like calm people down while they're
Yeah.
waiting by tapping into nature and that design indoors.
Well,
Um,
natural materials vibrate at a different level than
mm,
synthetics. And so it just makes sense that when you walk into a natural, it's like walking into nature. A week ago, I was in the Smoky Mountains, and just being in the mountains, to me, my body just buzzed with a good feeling. And that's kind of how we want to live and get away from the plastics. To your point, plastics are obviously bad for the outdoor environment, but very, very bad for us, or can be bad for us inside.
right. And then that whole idea too is like what is good for us. And it's also, the studies show, I have a whole chapter on volunteerism, environmental volunteerism, and this idea that when we do try to make a difference, do what we can without driving ourselves nuts about it, it
Right.
can make us feel better and that we're helping to contribute. And, it's challenging now with the climate crisis and, all of that news that always bombards us, like the fires, the floods. It's been kind
Right.
of calm lately, I guess, but the summer was pretty bad, the droughts, the heat waves. But having that, being able to choose products that are recycled, is better than choosing ones that aren't. And even if they are recycled plastic, I do that with my clothing as well. I really try to have a sustainable fashion goal. And it's tough,
Oh yeah.
sometimes you have to get something and you can't find it otherwise. But, having that goal and trying to at least slowly change over your home, what you're choosing to decorate your home with, the flooring, your furniture, and really looking and asking the questions like, when you're working with a decorator, it's like, or designer, or you're at the store, do you have anything that is a little bit sustainable that I can choose from?
Mhm.
And there are more options, as you know, because that's what you do. But I think it makes people feel better, happier, and proud when they're trying to make those decisions.
I agree. I can say that you and I were both sort of in this realm back in the 2000s, and 2005 2006 was like the zenith of the, I would call, the green building, green living era. And then the market crashed, then the housing market crashed, and all of a sudden money came out of real estate, and people who were buying sustainable materials for their homes decided, well, I can't afford anything, so I'm going to spend no money on this. And when
Mm,
those dollars finally came back into the market, people started asking the question, now, if I'm going to spend 20% more for a recycled glass and concrete countertop because it looks cool and it's eco-friendly, what benefit do I get beyond that? Besides just saying I'm doing something
mm,
better for the environment, is there a physical benefit that we can point to? And so I started seeing this shift in our uh, customer base, where before, it was in the mid 2000s, it was, we just wanted to look better to our neighbors and our friends and to say we've done something to help. And yes, it feels good. But beyond that, what is there? So people came back into the market and said, if I install this type of countertop, is it healthier for my family than just a standard countertop? Or is it a more sustainable, like longer lasting material? Will I have to worry about replacing this less often because of what I'm buying? And so that started happening from, I would say, 2013 to 2020. And then the pandemic hit.
I
And
was going
again,
to ask you though, what is the answer?
well, honestly, with that particular one, it came down to the fact that once people realized that recycled glass is a commodity, just like any other commodity. There's really no environmental benefit to reusing recycled glass. That market kind of went away. But beforehand, it's like bamboo flooring, for instance. You know, people you started using bamboo flooring in the 1990s. We started importing it in the 1990s, and it had all these environmental benefits. Fast growing species, very very hard. Downside, well, it all came from China, and so it had to be shipped here. As years went by, people realized A, bamboo is not as hard as wood is all the time. B, bamboo is not a wood, it's a grass. So it moves at a vastly different rate and it's much more subject to swelling and shrinking and cracking. And then the biggest issue from a sustainable environmental standpoint is we started finding that farmers in China were clear cutting indigenous species of trees and grasses to plant bamboo because the US market wanted bamboo so badly.
There's also, I know with the clothing, I looked into it from a clothing perspective, and they take like this great resource, but then they add all these terrible toxic chemicals to it. So it became a question of, wait, is it better or not? And it's really challenging for the consumer to figure out.
It really is, and that's a great point because it's like careful what you ask for. If they have to chemically modify something that much in order to make it usable, then why are we using it? And you know, I see this. You wrote an article about athletic, you know, performance gear, and I had a guest on the show a while back specifically talking about this too. And I can tell you that this is a bigger issue than I believe you and I even realize. I think most people are wearing athletic clothing like a performance type fabric, and they may not even know it. They may not know what's leaching into their blood system because of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you know, I'm as guilty as anyone. I mean, I will say it does last. That's the other thing though. You know, when you have a product like that lasts for a long time, it's a little bit harder to say, okay, I'm going to throw all this out and start over. And it's tough. They just haven't really been able to find as effective as a material. That's really, really challenging, but there are incredible, you know, the research is going on now where they're trying to use biomaterials and, you know, really being very creative with it. But then of course there's the cost issue.
So there's always a downside, right?
Always. And that was the one thing the big thing I learned when I was an environmental studies major in college was that it was like such a pull and pull. Like you can do this, but then this happens. It is one of the most challenging areas to study and to try to figure out because, you know, we're just doing like what you're talking about, wood being better than bamboo, but now you're cutting down trees or, you know.
Right. Well, and now the big thing now in construction is what's called mass timber, which is utilizing lumber in large format for framing of large exterior buildings to get rid of their use of concrete and steel. And the selling point is not only is it strong and it's sustainable because obviously wood, you know, trees regrow, but it's a carbon capture. And so as trees grow, they're sucking carbon out of the air, which it keeps it in the wood. So it's sequestered in the wood. My question always is, all right, in 100 years or 150 years, when that building is either torn down or burns down, all that carbon gets injected into the atmosphere at the exact same time. So what are we really doing besides kicking the can down the road? And I'm not trying to say this to poo-poo the idea of using mass timber, because I think it's pretty cool. I say this to say that there is no perfect way to do everything, and we have to look at everything not only in moderation, you know, that old saying, but also we need to strive for acceptance and tolerance and not strive for perfection, because that is absolutely impossible.
Yeah, and kind of take the step-by-step approach. For example, we have a new home and we chose the metal roof. And that's supposed to be a lot more energy efficient, especially in Florida with the heat. So, you know, is it perfect? No. When it rains, boy, is it loud.
Right.
But it is supposed to last long. Oh, and we had cell phone issues too. We had to get a booster because so everything has it, but I felt good. I'm like, I have a metal roof, it's more efficient, it's going to last way longer, and I think it looks really cool too. It's very
It
modern.
looks cool, and it's a peace of mind thing too. I've had roof leaks before in homes that I've owned, and that's the sound of dripping water. It's visceral to me now. It gives me a little bit of angina. And so using a metal roof, bringing that up. So perfect segue into this. You have to pick and choose your battles. And obviously, I think, everything you've written about over the years that I've read, it's a lot of that. It's you can't just do this and say, all right, I've done my part. It's pick and choosing your battles. Here's something else to think about. Maybe this is a better approach. A metal roof versus a 40-year dimensional asphalt shingle. Which one is better? Well, it depends on what the reason is for purchasing one of the two. I can argue either one of them is perfectly fine. However, what are the circumstances? And in your circumstance, in heavy rain areas, hurricane areas, where roofing materials get degraded so fast because of the sun and the elements, installing a metal roof just makes a lot of sense. Up here in Wisconsin, it makes sense for other reasons: snow load requirements, insulative value when you couple it with better insulated materials. But again, it's longevity. It's a 80-year roof versus a 30 to 40-year roof. So you look at long-term costs. But really, this is what I talk about in a lot of these shows, is talking about balancing. There is no perfect way to go. We have to look at these at different approaches and then determine what makes the most sense.
Yeah, and I think there's some low-hanging fruit, fortunately, that the market has shifted over the years, like paint.
Hmm.
We don't have to deal. It's like, of course you can get, low VOC, no VOC paint now. I was a kid. I don't believe that was the way it was, right? I mean, it
No.
was, and the lead paint and everything else. So like that's almost a given that it became the common, product that you could just choose.
Sure.
Furniture is a little bit more complicated. All
Yes.
the upholstery, they just haven't been able to. It's like the fashion industry, and they have such, the margins just don't allow for them to be that creative and smart with their designs and sustainable, that it's going to cost them and they take the cut. So they hit on that. So that's been pushback. But I think flooring also, I mean, if you're using porcelain, is that, a strong, long-lasting tile, is that good? Is that better and sustainable? Because it's
Yeah, I mean, my approach, it is. However, you have to look at how it's being applied, how it's being laid down. And so my approach on building materials almost always comes down to health of the occupant first. My personal motto is, what good is saving the environment if we're still poisoning the occupants? So I would like to look at that first. And I believe that materials that truly are human friendly are environmentally friendly, because we are a major part of the environment. I think the opposite is not true. I mean, to your point of like zero VOC paints, yes, zero VOC paints are better for the outdoor environment because they don't contain these carbon-based molecules that could contribute to outdoor air pollution. However, what do they replace those chemicals with? Well, most VOCs in paint are replaced with non-regulated ingredients: acetone, ammonia, and butyl acetate, which all three have been given specific exemptions by the EPA to be used in paints and not be disclosed. So all we're doing is we're taking out the ethylene glycol that we know is going to contribute to outdoor air pollution and replacing it with nail polish remover. So are we truly doing the right thing? And so I always look at it, the fact of the approach of the human health aspect first. Another really good example would be when compact fluorescent light bulbs came out in the late 2000s, and all of a sudden incandescents were banned and people were using compact fluorescents. And what happens when a light bulb either finally stops working or it falls on the ground and smashes? You sweep it up and you throw it away. Well, states were doing studies on their uh, waste plants and their recycling plants, and finding that there's high levels of mercury found in the water because of the mercury in the compact fluorescents. I think it was the state of Massachusetts did a study that said that if you dropped a compact fluorescent light bulb on a carpeted surface, you have to replace the carpeting because the mercury will never come out. So it's like it's
Hmm.
the unintended consequence of trying to do the right thing. And I always try to err on the side of human friendly first, but sometimes it does run in competition with what is actually environmentally friendly.
Yes, very complex.
It is. So you wrote an article a while back about gas versus electric fireplaces, and I'm not going to be holding your feet to the fire here, because I'm not sure how long ago this was written, and I know you're not a materials expert, but you have a lot of experience within the energy realm. And right now there's a big push, and you've probably seen it. You may have even written about electrifying everything to get rid of natural gas. I'm kind of curious to know um, how the tide is shifting on that around the country. Have you heard?
Hmm.
Because it used to be, all right, it's California, and then it might be New York. And what happens is eventually 10 years later, the Midwest finally starts to adopt some of these things, but there's a lot of pushback, mainly because of how are we creating the electricity? We're just burning coal or burning natural gas anyway. And then all the other ramifications of using all electric devices. I'm just kind of curious if you've heard anything about that.
Well, I know that when we decided we have a new home, a
Mhm.
new construction, and we chose induction for the first time in our lives, and
Okay.
my whole life was gas.
Mhm.
And I mean, everything that I read was really proving that the gas stove would be it's damaging to us. You know, it's terrible indoor air quality that we don't even know that, and they're continuing the studies, but the research right now is that it's not good for us.
Mhm.
Which actually kind of concerned me since I grew up with it, and like every time wherever I've lived, it's always been gas. I think one time in an apartment it was electric. And the induction is really fascinating. I mean, it's more the
Mhm.
most expensive option, but it's so fast when I boil a pot of water that it like explodes on me every time. And I have to watch my pot every time
Yeah.
now, which I used to be able to walk away for 10 minutes. But yes, there's tons of political pushback from one side that doesn't want to demonize gasoline. And I mean, I think that's because of the ties to the oil industry, I assume. But also, I think the idea of forcing people to spend the money to make the change.
Mhm.
If it's banned, now, of course, the places it is being banned, um, they're not asking people to change it that day. You know, it's just that when you then go to a store, you won't be able to replace it. I actually don't know how they're going to monitor that kind of ban.
Right.
Especially if it's different states, because so you drive to another state. I don't know. But that is the plan. I have read that the Karen administration and their goals, are to, and, and with my Energy Star background, that was a really successful program because they shifted over home electronics and appliances. But when we did that, we definitely worked with the industry, and it was a slow process, but they, improved their products because of
Right.
that. And that's a public-private partnership program. It was not a ban. It wasn't, a political ban.
Right.
So there's a difference. And so I
Right.
think there is the movement for that to get head in that direction. But with anything, you have strong lobbying that's going to say, wait, what about all our companies that own our
Right.
products that are gasoline?
Right.
So I think it's with the science, and it's going to depend on more studies, the way it's communicated to the public. If people actually are feeling personal effects from it,
Yeah.
then they may say next time they have the chance, they would change over. But
And,
it's one of
yeah.
those interesting topics to keep watch of, I think.
It really is, because 2 years ago, I think when people started bringing up this idea, like we're going to get these gas appliances we banned, and others would say, no, that'll never happen. And now 2 years later, it's starting to happen. And again, it's not necessarily a solid ban. It is a moratorium on allowing new developments to install gas lines, which is kind of
Right.
a way around of saying the exact same thing. Uh, what I fear is I have many clients around the country who have extreme electromagnetic sensitivities, and
Interesting. Hmm.
induction cooktops specifically because they use magnets. Yes, they're awesome. They're powerful. I've used them. They're fascinating to me. And as somebody who cooks a lot, I love the concept of them. Um, but for somebody who has electromagnetic sensitivities, when you touch a pan, you become part of the circuit. When you walk into the room, I have clients that can't even be in a house that has one of those.
Really?
And so all I say is, can we just pause on the forcing of this, and can we at
Mm,
least say, let's have a choice, and
mm,
maybe let's do some more research on it. I think it's the same, in my mind, it's the same idea as, I wish we could have stopped and done some research on 5G, on cellular service, because we know that microwaves can penetrate into the body, and actually it can affect the cells. How far does it go? How much damage does it do? We don't know. And so we just allow for all these new technologies. Now, currently in your home, it's not law that you have to use cell service, obviously, but you can't get away from it. And so now you have no choice. And so we're now asking people to get rid of a method of cooking that's been fine for the last 100 years, for the fear that, what if the gas line leaks, or what if they don't use their range hood, to, you have to use this product that we know may have some concerns too. I'm not arguing either way. I'm arguing, I guess, for the, can we have an honest discussion about it, and allow people to maybe make a choice based upon their own requirements. And I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion about kind of like that side of things yet.
I am not sure. I haven't really dug in that deep to it. I think it's also worth noting that clearly the electricity has to be powered by somewhere. So unless if you're a pure environmentalist, right, it's
Mhm.
being powered by your solar, your rooftop solar that you're generating the energy
Right.
yourself. So in the end, it really still is most likely being powered by a coal plant.
Yeah.
So it's look, I love electric vehicles. It's something I've just been proud to own a Tesla and
Mhm.
other a Volt. For years that was actually my master's thesis was on. Actually, it was public-private partnership programs with the automobile industry and trying to
Yeah.
get them to move. And they have. It's amazing what's happened in
Mhm.
25 years that you can now get these products. But there are questions. There are questions about the battery and what
Right.
happens to the battery and the pollution that causes, and where is the energy? Are you really saving anything if you're still getting ultimately the energy to charge your car from the coal plant? So again, I go back to, I guess, what I learned in college, that environmental studies, science, being an environmentalist is one of the most challenging
Yeah.
um, endeavors, because it's pull and pull, and so you do have to kind of. I think your mindset of like, well, let's look at the health and see where we go from there, I think is a really good place to start,
Yeah.
because it's personal, and we know that when it's healthy for us, it's going to be healthy for animals and the planet. So
Right.
I like that approach. I think that might narrow down all the confusion.
Well, and you kind of hit it before, it, because it's become so political, which it shouldn't, but it always does in this country or around the world, actually. I think that, common sense is not too common these days. And, I think, I mean, let's face it, um, the world has improved exponentially because of things like uh, electric cars. And I, what I mean by that is, and I don't know what the consequence of the actual electric vehicle is. I'm not saying specific to that, because we don't know yet. Um, there, like we talked about with compact fluorescence, the unintended consequence of trying to do the right thing. What I mean is the technology, the knowledge base that it's created. It is going to be vital to something for us in the near or far future, but it's definitely something that we as a people we need. We just don't know if this is the right mechanism for this technology yet. So I always applaud the early adopters because, somebody's got to take a chance, and we just don't know. My hope is as we do start to learn more, we now start asking the questions like, all right, so before we force people into this, can we at least start having the conversation about what does that actually mean long term? And so I think I'm starting to hear rumbles of this around the country, but it's just so popular right now, the idea of electrifying everything, that I'm afraid that that's noise, and the conversation about health, the conversation about will the electrical grid even support what we're trying to do, or is the whole world going to be on fire because we just can't we can't actually support this? um, I would love to have a conversation about that. I mean, just a topic for an upcoming article maybe.
Yeah. Well, and also the fact that, look, electric electrification is one thing, but really they know the research shows if you want to be the pure clean energy, right, is hydrogen, nuclear,
Yes,
but those are so explosive, they're that that's really such a conundrum
it
because
is.
they know that that's the cleanest way to go about things, but
Right.
there's so many risks involved. Um,
Yeah. Well, and then of course what we don't talk about at all, which across the board, we use way too much energy. We have way too many
well,
devices. We have, look back to just 20 years ago, the devices we have now that require energy. If we just would maybe harken back to days when things were a little more simple, but then you have to look at, but what has all that technology done for us on a positive side? It's a balance. It's a yin and yang.
yeah, and then the whole idea too, I hear a lot about is the closed loop, product cycle. And
Mhm.
that's really where we need to be in the sense of also like, we're given this planet, it came with resources, creating resources like plastic that have nowhere to go. Like
Right.
they don't just, it's not like wood that then goes back in, from dust to dust kind of
Right.
concept.
Right.
Plastic, it doesn't go anywhere. And so, the idea of why did we do that? And now we're left with this junk.
Right.
And so that idea of, well, let's look at what we have. Let's see how we can maybe revamp it, um, and then not even use it to begin with, which good luck,
Yeah.
that's probably the hardest sell.
Oh,
Um,
without a doubt. I mean, when Bill McDonough came out with his cradle to cradle concept years ago, and that the way I look at it is, um, why does the plastics industry exist these days? Just to exist. Or what I mean by that is, yes, 100 years ago, less than 100 years ago, when plastics were invented, uh, and these were created. I mean, the same plastics that were created back in the 1930s still exist today in some form because they don't ever go anywhere. You're exactly right. So the industry proliferates itself basically to take care of, and now they've created industry in the recycling of those plastics. So they exist just to exist. And at some point, we have to start to break the dependence on those products. But we've gotten so used to it. We've gotten accustomed to the performance values, the cost of
Convenience.
materials. It's
Convenience.
it's hard to turn around.
Well, what's really fascinating, and the light bulb went off when I learned that one of the reasons why the plastic industry actually is thriving. So even though there's the more that's produced, the more that's here just hanging around, they're still producing more and more. That's because their oil companies and the actual oil amount that they've been producing has gone down because of electrification. So they've just replaced it with another problem.
Wow.
And unfortunately, you top that with the fact that the recycling really isn't happening like it used to either, when China closes doors and all that. So
Mhm.
it really has to be reused. I have a pocketbook with the lining was made from reused plastic bottles. I've got a pair of workout clothes, pants as well. I mean, I think that's where you have to get really creative with it,
Yeah.
because having it sit around is just, it's not helping. And then people, we as the citizens, as the consumers, need to say, okay, we don't need any more of this. Like, stop
Right.
making it. Like another Coke bottle. Like, no, we don't need it. So
Yeah.
it's
It's
tough.
it's an interesting, very interesting conundrum we're in. And I don't know if there is any answer to it.
Plastic
It just,
houses,
yeah, right, right.
like building construction.
Honestly, I mean, in the building industry, there's been a lot of work done in composites that
Mhm.
utilize plastics. You mentioned flooring. In the last 5 years, the use of luxury vinyl plank flooring has become like the norm in homes. And the core of a lot of those flooring materials is what's called SPC, which is a stone plastic composite. And
Right.
it's made these flooring materials more durable, longer lasting, waterproof, less expensive. So there's a lot of upside to the use of the plastics within the stone. The same thing
Mhm.
with like decking materials.
Decking, I was gonna say,
Yep,
yep.
and siding materials. So they are finding uses for it. It's an interesting discussion because I don't think there's an absolute right answer that across the board fits everybody. And so I love to get perspectives of others and different ideas.
And then the other question would be, does having those materials, do they have a health impact? You
Yes.
know, if you're walking barefoot for 20 years on that, is it a problem? And they don't know. Nobody knows.
No, they don't. And so I do recall that PET, which is the recycled water bottle
Yeah.
material. Um, I did a presentation on this years ago, and the chemist who invented that particular plastic said in his original report that the product should never come in contact with human skin
Wow.
because it'll enter the bloodstream, create trihalomethanes, and essentially eat the body from the inside out. And yet companies like Patagonia and others are winning environmental awards because they're utilizing recycled plastic water bottles to make hats and jackets and gloves. And so it's like, again, they're taking stuff out of the waste stream. Awesome. What are we doing with it that actually makes sense? And that may not be the best thing to do with it, human health wise.
Right. It really is one of the big questions that needs to be answered. And then,
Right.
tying into of cancer, and why that's happening at different levels. So, well, I hope the younger generations continue to study this and come up with
Right.
solutions.
I love it. But these are the questions I think that that you're right. They will be faced with. It's because of people like you that they even know about these topics. And I appreciate all that you've done in your career.
Thank
And I
you.
want to make sure we promote your book again. So
Oh,
if you
thank you.
can hold that up to the camera again, I'll certainly have a link in the show notes.
Sure. Finding Eco Happiness. It isn't officially a parenting book, but it's really for all of us. It's all about what you can do to connect to nature to feel happier and calmer. And, you know, the beginning talks about some of these attributes that you could put in your house where you're connecting to nature, through the patterns and the colors and the smells and textures. But it also talks about volunteerism and mindfulness and connection with animals. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners have pets, because I feel like everyone except me in my neighborhood has a dog now. A lot of pandemic dogs out there. Um, and at the end, like I said, at the very end, I say we want to really recognize the benefit of our planet, of nature, so we can convince people or understand the importance of protecting it. And whether that's the carpet you buy or your recycling habit, whatever it is we can do to keep this planet going. That's my mission in life.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I really appreciate you dedicating so much of your time to this and your knowledge and expertise. And of course, really thank you for being on the show today. What's the best way to get in touch with you if people wanted to find about more of your writings?
Yeah, sure. So to learn more about the topic in the book, that's ecohappinessproject.com. There's tons of blog posts and free information up there. My freelancing hat, you can go to sandyschwartz.com, and that's SANDI schwartz.com. And I, just so you know, get in touch if you have any ideas, if you have a brand, if you have a business that's doing all these wonderful, sustainable, innovative things. I'm always looking for new sources. I'm looking for new publications to pitch. I have some goals to try to get in some of those high named publications like, Washington Post maybe. So if
Yep.
you have a really great story, let me know.
Fantastic. I will definitely put all your information on the show notes. Sandi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was so
It was
great
an
to meet you.
absolute pleasure to meet you, and look forward to having you back on the show sometime.
Sounds great.
All right. Take care.